Look at all those pretty colors! Today we're only going to be using the bottom colors, so the other ones can be peaceful and remain sleeping for a little while longer. They will come into action next week a lot. So we're going to start with these colors, and more specifically we're going to start with the red color. If you're working with different yarn, please find your color A, because that's the color we're logically starting with. We start this project with a slip knot on the hook, just like you did for the swatch. I'm hoping you've made the swatch by now. I'll zoom in a little bit and then we get started. We start by chaining 6. Then we're going to look for the 4th chain from the hook. So this loop on the hook doesn't count. This is the 1st chain from the hook, the 2nd, the 3rd, and the 4th. Now that gets a double crochet. So you yarn over once, so it's the, I never remember whether it's a UK or the US treble, double or the treble, but you yarn over once. That's how we start. Then we go into the 4th chain, and we yarn over and pull up a loop. And you've got 3 loops on your hook. And then you yarn over, pull through 2 loops, and yarn over, pull through 2 loops. That's your first double crochet. Now you see that this chain has gotten a bit bigger. So we've done that one. Now we've got 2 chains left, that one and that one. Both of them will get a double crochet. So you yarn over, go into the loop, yarn over, pull up a loop, 3 loops on the hook, yarn over, pull through 2, and yarn over, pull through 2. And then the final chain gets a final double crochet. So yarn over, into the loop, yarn over, pull up a loop, and then yarn over, pull through 2, and yarn over, pull through 2. This is the first block, and that will sit, if you look at the schematic, at the bottom right corner of the schematic. Doesn't matter whether you're left-handed or right-handed, because corner to corner is two-sided. So I recommend you, for left-handed as well, to look at the schematic from the bottom right corner. Even if it becomes your bottom left corner, you can just flip over the blanket. It's not that difficult. For the second row, we're going to repeat those exact steps to begin with. We're going to chain 6. We're going to look for the 4th chain from the hook. You can see these V shapes, and my thumb is underneath the 4th one. I'm going to yarn over, go into that chain, yarn over and pull up a loop. Now you've got 3 loops on your hook. Yarn over, pull through 2, and yarn over, pull through 2. Do the same in the next chain. That's a double crochet. And the next chain as well. And that's a bit in the crossover between the second block you're making now and the first block you've already made. Now we want to make another block, but we're not going to chain 6. Because we want to attach it to this thing over here. And we're always going to look for the rounded edge of the block. You want your hook to end up next to it. And to be able to do that, you're going to flip it. So you're going to move it up. And that makes it possible for you to put your hook in that curved edge of the block. This is quite straight. This is a bit more curved. And this is the chain 3 space. So in the written pattern, when I refer to the chain 3 space, that's this thing. You're going to make a slip stitch in it. So yarn over, pull through the chain space and to the loop on your hook. Now we're going to make another block over here, and we do that by chaining 3. And then making 3 double crochet into that same chain space. 1, 2, and 3. So this was your second row, and you've now made 2 blocks in your second row. Now, the usual way to make corner to corner is that you would now change color and add the black, what you see above in the schematic. You see above the 2 red blocks. That's not what we're going to do with this beautiful project, because there's a join as you go method that makes it much nicer to work corner to corner, and also much easier to work corner to corner. Because with this blanket with 8 different colors and lots of different strips of color, or panels, or however you want to call them, it would become a mess of little bubbles attached to your blankets to be able to continue in a corner to corner way. So we're not going to do that. We're going to make one color and then fasten off, and then we're going to attach the next color and then fasten off. And the order in which we're going to do this is we're going to make the bottom strip first, and then the one above it, and then the one above it, and then the one above it. So we're going to build up this project, whether you're making a blanket or a wall hanging or a rug or whatever you're going to make of it, we're going to build it up from the bottom of the schematic to the top. Doesn't really matter because it's reversible and it's symmetrical and it's gorgeous, but we're going to start at the bottom because that's easier, because things start at the bottom. I don't know why with blankets and with crochet, so we start there and we're going to build it up slowly. So I'm going to show you now how we're going to make the strip. So it's only 2 blocks high, so it's already a little bit different than our swatch, which was square. We're not going to make this square, we're going to make this a long, nice long thin shape. So I'm going to show you now how. So it's already high enough. We're now going to add the width. So because we don't want to add height, where we hit height, yes, I think, we're not going to chain 6, but we're only going to chain 3. 1, 2, 3. And then we're going to the chain 3 space of this last block we made. So this is the last block we made. You can see that because your yarn is attached to it, and you want your hook to end up there. So you're going to turn it. Then you're going to put your hook in it, yarn over, and pull through both. That's a slip stitch. Now you're going to chain 3 and make 3 double crochets into that same space. So it's the chain 3 space of the last block of the second row. 3 double crochet. Don't worry if the speed is not exactly what you're used to. I usually just pause videos until I'm ready to continue again. I see there's a tiny knot in my yarn, but luckily I've spotted it before I've pulled it tight, so I can just get it out. There we go. Now my hook already nicely sits next to the curved bit of this block, so that's a chain space, I can recognize it. And I'm going to make a slip stitch in it. So now we've got this nice, cute little square. But we don't want it to be square, we want it to make a long strip. So we're going to chain 3. And then we're going to make 3 double crochet into the same space. So that's 1, 2, and 3. Pretty-no? That's the 3rd row done and dusted. Now if we look at the blocks, we see that we've got 3 blocks here and 2 blocks there. We want to have 6 by 6. So 6 by 2, so 2 rows of 6 blocks. So in this direction, we do want to increase. So we're not going to chain 3 and make a slip stitch, because then we would make a very tiny block and we want to make a longer strip. So on this side, we do want to increase. So we're going to start with chain 6. Then we're going to find the 4th chain from the hook and make a double crochet into the 4th chain from the hook, and then the 5th chain from the hook, and then the 6th chain from the hook. Well, Now we want to attach this weird looking thing to the rest of it. And in order to do that, we're going to flip this over so that our hook ends up next to the chain space again. So this is the chain space. I'm going to yarn over, pull through the chain space and through the loop on the hook. Then we're going to chain 3. And into the same chain space, we're going to make 3 double crochet. And then all that's left in this 4th row is to make a slip stitch into this chain space. Now you can see that we've got 3 blocks here and 4 blocks there. I hope you can recognize the shape of the blocks. Now, we don't want to move that way, so we're not going to start with chain 6. We want to move this way, because we want to make it long and nice and thin. So we're going to start with chain 3, and then a slip stitch into this chain space. So you can flip your work and make a slip stitch into it. Then we're going to chain 3. And make 3 double crochet into that same space. Then we're going to make a slip stitch into the chain space, chain 3, and then we make 3 double crochet into that same space. So it's a repetition of the same steps, which makes it a very relaxing technique once you get the hang of it. Now we have 5 blocks on this side, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 4 on this side. We want to have 6 on both. So to make the 6th block here, and the last 2 here, we're going to start with chain 6 because we do actually want to increase in that direction. Then we're going to look for the 4th chain from the hook and make a double crochet into it. And we also make a double crochet into the 5th chain from the hook and into the 6th. Then we want to attach it to the rest, so we flip this up and we make a slip stitch into the chain space of the previous block. And then we're going to chain 3 and make 3 double crochet into the same space. Then we're going to make a slip stitch into the chain space. Now there's one last block to be made. For this final block, we're going to chain 3. We're going to flip it so that we end up near the chain space of this same block, last one we made. Then we're going to chain 3. And we're going to make 3 double crochet into that same space. 1, 2, and 3. Now there are some important last steps to do to fasten off. So first we're going to go into this chain space. I'm going to yarn over and pull up a loop to make a slip stitch. And it will be tempting to now just cut off the yarn. And it wouldn't matter too much if you do this. But I always prefer to chain 3 now. And to make a slip stitch into the corner of this block. That just makes it a tiny bit neater. Because at all these sides of the blocks we have chain 3 spaces. And here we have a chain 3 space. So if we would fasten off here, that would just be a little bit weird because we would miss this chain 3 space. It wouldn't be terrible, don't get me wrong. You're not at fault when you do that. It's just a little bit prettier when you try to end up your panels or your every color in one corner and not on the side of your work. Then we're gonna chain one and we're gonna cut the yarn. I have a tiny scissors, as you can see. And then we're gonna pull this through and pull it tight. And that's your first little strip of this blanket done. Now there's one important step left to do with this color before we continue. What you want to do is put your block like this, with the starting thingy in the bottom and the ending thingy in the top. If you take a close look at it, here I can see my tiny chain one and I can still pull on it a bit. Here I cannot see a tiny chain one, but I can see a slip knot. I hope you can recognize this. What I want you to do is take a closing stitch marker, and maybe a prettier one than I have here, and put it on the front of this panel. It will stay there for a long time so that you can always see what your bottom right corner is. This is important because you want to know how to put your work down before you attach the other panels, which is what we're going to do now. So I want you to grab your color B and crochet with me. Now we're going to attach the second color. We're going to pay attention to how we put this panel down. Your stitch marker is on the front, your starting yarn is over here, and we're going to attach in the opposite corner from the starting yarn on the long side. I'm going to make a slip knot on my yarn, but not yet on my hook. And I'm going to insert my hook into the bottom chain of these 3 chains. This can be a little bit fiddly, but you want your hook to be in the bottom corner of this panel. So this is between or underneath the 2 loops of this bottom chain. So now visually it sits in the bottom corner of this. Then I'm going to put my slip knot on my hook and pull it through to the front. Now we're going to chain 3, but Hilly has this little trick to make sure that the starting yarn is already a little bit weaved in. And that little trick is that she starts with yarning over with both yarns. So if you see in the pattern with double yarn is what she calls it, or both yarns, this is what that means. It ensures that your starting yarn has been attached a little bit firmer. And then you can drop this and chain 2. If this is too complicated for you, just chain 3 with the normal thread like you would normally do. Please don't worry too much about this. It's just a little trick to make it a little bit easier to work away all the ends. What we're going to do now is we're going to make a slip stitch here between these 2 blocks. And in order to be able to do that, we need to flip our work a little bit. So we're going into this stitch, and we're going to make a slip stitch. And you see that I put this little yarn end on top of my work. There's a reason for this, because we can work it away completely without using a needle. Isn't that lovely? So that's what we did. We made a slip stitch in between those 2 blocks. So be careful not to put it in between the 2 blocks on the long side, but on the short side. Now we're gonna chain 3. I'm going to flip the work again, and if you want to work away this little yarn thingy a bit more secure, you can put it over here, and then we can make 3 double crochet into this space, and then we basically work over 2 of the starting yarn's ends, so it's done in that direction and already done in that direction, so we can just cut it at the end of it. So 3 double crochets over all these ends and the chain 3 space you just made. Now if you want, you can cut this bit of yarn already. You can also not fiddle with the yarn if you think it's too complicated, or wait until a later stage in this pattern you feel more comfortable with it, but I just wanted to show you at the beginning. Now I'm going to teach you a little trick that's important. You've made this block now, and it has vertical double crochets that we see from the front of the work. So 2 things to pay attention to: the direction of the double crochets and whether you see it from the front or from the back. From the front you can clearly see these V shapes. If you flip it over and it's on the back, you have more difficulty discerning V shapes. So this is the back of your work, of this block, sorry, and this is the front of this block. When you look directly next to the block, so this one, you see that it has horizontal double crochets, and this is the back, because I cannot really clearly see V shapes on top of it here, but if I would flip it over, I can see these V shapes on top of it. This should always be the case. If you look at a random place in your project, it should always have back to front, back to front, back to front, and always vertical and horizontal flipped. That makes the corner to corner look really nice if you pay attention to this. If you don't pay attention to this, you may end up in difficulties later on when attaching panels with this join as you go method. For the second row of the second color, we're going to chain 6. Going to yarn over and make a double crochet into the 4th, the 5th, and the 6th chain from the hook. Just like you've done a couple of times already. Now we want to continue working into this blue color, so we're going to flip the work and we're going to make a slip stitch into this chain space. Now we're gonna chain 3, yarn over, go into the chain space and make 3 double crochets into this chain space. Now we want to attach it here, and you attach it into the last slip stitch you made into the corner. Can be a bit fiddly because you pulled on this yarn, but you want to go into that slip stitch. Yarn over and pull through. That was it for the second row. For the third row, we're going to chain 3, flip the work, and make a slip stitch into this chain space. And from here on out, you follow the same pattern as you've done for the first panel. So you're going to continue increasing on one side, so you can work in that direction and make it bigger, and not increasing on this side, so just chaining 3 and slip stitching. That makes sure you get this shape of 2 blocks high. We already have that. And then this needs to be 12 blocks long if you work the small version. So you're going to continue with chaining 3 and making 3 double crochets into those chain spaces. That was it for row 3. And you're going to want to do this until you have 12 blocks high and 12 blocks wide and 2 blocks high, depending on how you look at it. This is how it's going to be when it's worked. This is how you're working on it. But therefore also the stitch marker is nice because you can see what it is supposed to look like in the end. For row 4 of the second color, you're going to start with chain 6. And then you're going to make a double crochet into the 4th, the 5th, and the 6th chain from the hook. Then you're going to flip your work to be able to go into that chain space of the previous block. Then you're going to chain 3 and make 3 double crochet into that same chain space. Now we're going to slip stitch into that chain space. I want you to continue working until you have a nice little strip of 2 blocks high and 12 blocks long. I think by now you should be able to work this out because it's a continuation of the same steps. Please make sure on the rounds to keep switching between a round that starts with chain 6 or a round that starts with chain 3, turn, make a slip stitch, because else you get a very wonky shape. It's one of the things I love most about corner to corner is that it really tells you when you're going wrong, because then your shape starts to be really weird. So we're going to continue this until you can count 12 blocks, and then I'll show you how to fasten off again, because that's something we've only done once. Maybe you need a little bit of a reminder on how to do this. So you just carry on until you have 12 blocks high, and you can count your blocks by counting either the chain spaces or just looking at, this is a vertical block, this is a horizontal block, or the other way around. Horizontal, vertical, horizontal, vertical, horizontal, vertical. So you can count those. So now I'm at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, just as big as this one was. But this one needs to be bigger. It needs to be 12. So we're just going to continue until there's 12 of these little blocks. And then I'll get back to you to show you how to fasten it off. So when one of your 2 sides has reached 12 blocks, you still want to make this last block. So that basically makes row 13 of your panel. We're going to chain 3 for it, make 3 double crochet into the same space. And then these last few steps that I want you to make is slip stitch into this chain space, chain 3, and then flip over your work and slip stitch into the corner here, and then make a chain and cut your yarn so you can fasten it off. It just makes for a tiny bit of a neater finish, if you ask me. This is what it should look like now. You have your tiny, or your 6 block wide first color, and then your 12 block wide in color B. Woohoo! So the third color, color C, is going to be done exactly the same as the second color. So that's lovely. If you've worked this out and it worked, you can also do the next thing. What we're going to do again is we're going to put this on the front of our work. We're going to put the starting end at the bottom. And then we're going to look for the opposite side. So where you darned off, the opposite side is where you want to be. You're going to put your hook into that bottom chain. Again, this can be a bit difficult, but it doesn't really matter. And then you're going to put your slip knot on your hook and pull it through to the front. Then you're gonna chain 3, and I'll leave it up to you whether you want to do the double threaded chain 1 and then a normal chain 2, just to secure the end a little bit so you don't have to work with it. And then you're going to flip your work so you can make a slip stitch in between these 2 blocks on the end of it. And I like to put the yarn here before I make my slip stitch, sorry. Like that. And then you're gonna chain 3, turn your work again, put your little yarn thingy on top here, and then you can make 3 double crochet into that chain 3 space you just created. 1, 2, 3. And for me now, this yarn is attached enough. You've put it through the chain 1 and then you've looped it here and you've looped it there, so you can just carefully cut it close to your work. Saves you one end to darn in. Now we are going to do the exact same thing. So we're going to chain 6, do a double crochet in the 3rd, 4th and 5th from the hook, slip stitch into this and make a block here. I'll show you these 2 steps and then I'll trust you can make this 12 by 2 strip yourself. I have full trust in your capabilities, and also I have full trust in you asking a question if you need help. That's how trusting I am. So we're going to make a double crochet into the 4th, 5th and 6th chain from the hook. I'm sorry if I'm stumbling over my English words. I'm used to speaking Dutch in my tutorial videos much more. We're going to flip this so you end up in the same color. And then you're going to chain 3, make 3 double crochet into that same space, just like that. And then you're going to make a slip stitch into the slip stitch where you ended up your last color with a bit of aggression, or make a slip stitch there. And from here on out, you're going to be making the switch between 3 chain and a slip stitch on one side, and then on the other side, chain 6 to increase. And you're going to make again a 12 by 2 strip, just like you did for your color B. You're going to do that for your color C as well. So for the 4th strip, we're going to again do the same, this time with the D color. We're gonna, not on the hook yet, we're gonna find that little bottom stitch. Make sure you have this on the front of your work, and make sure that after you've made your first block, please check if the direction and the orientation of the blocks is correct. And what I mean by that, I'm going to show you again, is that the vertical double crochets should be against the horizontal double crochets, and the back of your double crochets should be next to those on the front. So after you've made your first block for this entire project, please, 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 please do this little check when you get your scissors out to cut the yarn. Please check if this is opposite to this, and this is always the front, so this should always be the back. Please do this at the start of every new color, because that makes your project looks beautiful. Then this color is exactly the same as the one before. With the next color, we're going to do something sort of new, because that strip is a bit wider than these strips in the middle. So I'll get back to you to show you how we can finish off this first entire beautiful strip that lays on the bottom of your project. But these are all steps that you've done before, and that possibly by now you've familiarized yourself with a little bit, and else you can just skip back in the video to follow along with what I did for the red or the blue. Because the steps are always the same for this bottom strip. I'll finish making this one, so it will be 2 high and 12 wide. And then I will get back to you for the last color. That's again color A, which we started with. So finish this, and then I'll get back to you with the last one. I'm going to show you 2 more things to do. The first is to make your final strip. I've got it oriented in the wrong way because my darning off end is on the bottom and it should be on the top. So the first thing is the final color, which is again color A, and the last thing is darning in your ends. I'm going to show you both and then we're done for week 1. I'm going to insert my hook into the bottom chain. I'm going to put my slip knot on the hook and pull it through the front. And then I'm going to start with yarning over with 2 yarns to secure it a little bit. And then I'm going to make 2 more two more chains before slip stitching into this stitch between 2 blocks on the side, on the short side. And then I'm going to chain 3. I'm going to put the yarn on top of this chain 3 loop so that I can immediately make sure that it's sturdy. And then I'm going to pause here and check if my directions, so these are vertical and these are horizontal, so that's good. And this is from the front and this is from the back because I cannot see these clear V shapes from here. I can't see them here. So this is the back of that block. That means that this is attached in the correct way. So now I can cut that little yarn. And now this panel is going to be done in the very same way as the other ones. It's just a little bit longer. It's going to be 16 by 2. So it's not different, you just carry on a little bit longer until you have 16 blocks by 2. So you're gonna do that, then you're gonna fasten off. Don't forget to fasten off in the little corner, not in the middle of your strip. And then I'll get back to you for the final step of this week, and that's making sure you get the other ends darned in. You could of course wait with that until the end of the project, but I'm going to show you anyway because it's nicer to do it as you go, in my opinion. I tend to do them at the end of every strip or at the end of every sitting. So if I know I need to be in bed by 10, then I tend to stop at 9:45 and just darn away those ends before I put the project down. Not only with this project, but with most projects where we don't use a needle join. It's just easier that way because I don't really like it when I have to do all the ends at the end. Maybe you do like that, so that's up to you. But I'll show you in the next bit of the video how you can work away those ends. And then we're done for week 1. Before you darn in your ends, please pause this video and double check that there is 6 blocks in your first panel, so the first color A, then 12 blocks for your second, third, and fourth panel, and then 16 blocks for your last panel. Please double check this. Also double check that you have your little stitch marker on the small one. And then I'm going to show you how to darn away your ends. So to darn away your ends, you need a needle and you need a scissors. Not that complicated. Now, there's many ways to do this, of course, and it's not rocket science, but I'm going to show you anyway. What you can do is go back through this slip stitch and then into those chains for a bit, just like that. And then if you want to be extra careful, you can do it again. So you can switch directions and go through these stitches again. So that's one way to do it in the chain spaces. They do become a little bit bigger when you do this, but you know, that's what it is. It also depends a bit, I think, on what you're making. If it's going to be a wall hanging and nobody's going to be jumping up and down on it, then it's less important to make these very secure. I mean, you have made a little knot, so they should be okay. If it's going to be a favorite children or grandchildren's blanket, then perhaps you want it to put it away more securely. So how often you change directions and how often you darn away this end, at least for me, is always a matter of what the project is needed for. This is another position in which you can darn away the ends through the bottom of the double crochets. Maybe a little bit less visual than through the chain space, I don't really know. Cut it close to the end. So I'll show you again with the bottom of the double crochets. Obviously you do this in the color where you worked in. So I sort of diagonally go through this first double crochet of this group of 3. I go down. And then I move through the bottom of these 3 double crochets and again upwards and out. And then I fiddle with it a bit to make sure that I haven't secretly made it much tighter than the other double crochets. And then I can cut it. It's not that many ends because the end of or the beginning of every color you already sort of fix whilst you're working. So I think it's quite acceptable for such a colorful project to only have so few ends. Especially if you consider the regular way of doing corner to corner, because then you would have a gazillion. I wouldn't even be able to calculate how many, but it would be lots and lots and lots. So this way of join as you go with the color to color is really awesome, because it also leads to less stress when you're crocheting, but also leads to a lot less ends to weave in. So this video is now 3 minutes long, in which I've done all the ends for this first gorgeous strip of crochet. So this is it for week 1. You've made this tiny little cute little scarfy thingy. I don't know which colors you have used, but this already makes me very happy. Please do share a photo of where you are at this moment with your crochet thingamajiggy. I don't know what to call this, but with your start of your beautiful project. Some people will be relieved that it's over for week 1. Some people will be disappointed because they wanted to crochet more. I think that's always the case with projects like these. You kind of have to find the sweet spot. I hope I did with this. Next week we're going to crochet up until half of the project. So then you've got lots more rows to go. In order to be able to do that, I need to teach you some other joining methods, because for this first strip, you're going to be attaching to one side. So you kind of already know how that works. But then for the second strip, if you can sort of visualize it, you need to attach on 2 sides. And then attaching is not always the same for this second half or for the first half of the blanket, because sometimes you will have to make horizontal double crochets and sometimes you'll have to make vertical double crochets to start in your little corner. So those 2 techniques, sort of more or less, I'm going to teach you next week, and then you can just calmly and peacefully crochet away, I hope. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask them in English or in Dutch, or in the groups and any other language if the moderators can help you there. I'm really happy. I hope you're really happy, and please have fun crocheting.